Today's guest on the podcast is Ribhu. Ribhu is a AI guy. He did his bachelor's from UCSD in cognitive science and machine learning, currently building an education startup, Kaksha.ai, with his Plaksha friends, where he is leading the research roadmap. It's been fun getting to hang out and chat with Ribhu over the last few days over a variety of things. One of the things I admire about him is his open-mindedness to explore and examine ideas without any ego, and his ability to hold and work with complex ideas. Ribhu worked as a research assistant at the Brain and Cognition Lab at UCSD. In our conversation, we explore the implications of the popularization of AI through the large language models, such as GPT4 and ChatGPT, agentic behavior of GPT4, need for values and regulations in the field, cognition, learning, digital nomadism, and other fascinating ideas. Podcraft is about exploring the minds of interesting people with the spirit of curiosity, learning, and unlearning. Let's go into the conversation. Thanks for being here, Ribhu.
Yeah, glad to be here finally.
The large language models are growing on steroids. There are ChatGPT and GPT4 forwards on mom and pop groups now, and there's like new applications popping up every day, which are using these models as their base.
Right. Yeah.
So it's the landscape is growing pretty big, pretty fast. How are you processing this landscape shift?
So yeah, I think very fast is probably like the best way to put it, because I don't think anyone thought that these capabilities would increase, like these models would be this good, this quick.
Yeah.
I mean, all of these capabilities, especially like with GPT4, apparently, like because not everyone has access yet.
Yeah.
But from the limited access, like the people who do have it, they've been doing some crazy things with like even in the demo that we saw with the napkin, like sketch on the napkin to like a full functioning website. That's, I mean, it's like that dichotomy of like, oh, it's amazing.
Yeah.
But it's also like, what about the people who spend their lives becoming developers? Like, what do they do now?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a very...
There feels for sure like a lot of uncertainty about like how is it gonna like impact the future, especially like I think like the human part of it, like how will it interact with our lives?
Yeah.
Because this is just like taking over.
Definitely. Yeah.
At like a feeling level, how do you feel about these changes?
I don't know. It definitely starts to feel a little dystopian in a certain sense, where like the a lot of what we always used to view as like purely human endeavors, like creativity or like just distilling instruction and creating something, that sort of thing, that was like very innately human. But now we're seeing like non-human entities being able to do the same thing. So it brings up a lot of these existential questions. Questions about
what does it mean to be human?
Exactly. So it's
I think that's a
it's a very
top dollar question.
Yep.
What do you think are some of the let's talk about some of the implications, some of the like the interesting ones and also the concerning ones.
Yeah. So the implications, I mean, probably like the biggest one is like the whole the alignment that a lot of people are talking about. Like these models, they need to be aligned with like human values, and now like because we're starting to take things into like basically like we're starting to breach the super intelligence territory right now. And so there's this there's the orthogonality thesis, or like the orthogonality hypothesis by Nick Bostrom. So he's a pretty like big researcher on like existential risk, and
Mm-hmm.
he wrote like a book on it. It's called Superintelligence, and
Okay.
so in that, like he like one of the central theses of that was this orthogonality thing, where it talks about like the intelligence, like the level of intelligence and the goals. They're always orthogonal. So like just because something is intelligent doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to go towards the same goals. That
Mm-hmm.
so it basically argues that these two things are quite different. And so what that means is that if we start to reach like start to create these super intelligences, their goals might not be aligned with ours
Right.
just because they're intelligent.
Right.
So we cannot always like impose this anthropomorphism on them,
Yeah.
like that
They're probably like going to be reflective of like human nature, but not
but
necessarily the
the goals,
values
exactly,
which make
exactly,
sense at a collective level.
exactly.
Right.
So that risk, it's starting to like kind of happen. Like there's these, obviously the policy and safety teams at these organizations.
Yeah.
I think OpenAI has in the past, I mean, they've been quite good with all of this, but
Right.
I don't know, that move towards like more closed
Yeah.
source, it's kind of not that good because
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't invite a lot of like, because usually like what OpenAI
What do you
used to
mean by
be,
closed source? Like that? Is it in reference to the recent like
yeah, the
the technical
GPT-4 thing. Yeah,
documentation
so
not
basically
telling much?
they're not disclosing the training data, they're not
Okay.
disclosing the parameters, the
Okay.
model architecture.
Okay.
So it's like, we know this is a model that was trained on something and it works. But what is the model? Like, if you don't know that, then you can't have discussions around it, discussions around the implications of it,
Yeah. Some of the
right?
critical questions,
Exactly.
because
You can't
you
ask
can.
it because
Right.
it's just an API for us.
Yeah.
It's a black box to the
Yeah.
outsiders. So it's closed in the sense that it's closed within the groups working inside OpenAI.
Yeah.
So that limits. I mean, that again brings back the question of like human values. Like, so does this just incorporate the values of OpenAI and not humanity as a whole? But
Right.
then why do they get to decide? So like it's just, yeah, like this
Yeah.
whole discussion, yeah. Um, but other companies have been kind of doing a better job. So there's another company called Anthropic,
Mm-hmm.
and so the founder is actually like a ex-employee of OpenAI,
Mm-hmm.
and he kind of left and started his own thing, and they're a bit more like heavy on this
Okay.
end, and
Okay.
so their chatbot, I think it's called Claude. They just started like the wait list for it,
Okay.
so it'll be available to the public soon. It's
Right.
also like similar architecture to like GPT-3, like again, like trained a bit
Okay.
more and similar chat interface.
Yeah.
But the only difference is that they had this framework of like the three H's. So it was like helpfulness, honesty, and harmlessness.
Right.
So they defined that these are the three values that we'll put at the core of this.
Yeah.
And so they try to like align it towards, so because most of these chatbots, they're like, so right now this thing called like the RLHF, which is
Yeah.
like reinforcement learning with human feedback. Basically, like the way we interact with these bots, they get directed towards that behavior. So
Right.
like good behavior is rewarded,
So
and
human is actually involved in the training.
yeah,
By
even for ChatGPT
right.
it is,
Right.
but for this especially, like because they defined these values,
Okay.
it automatically steered.
So the human training behavior is guided from these values, is what you're saying.
Correct.
Okay. And we don't have like a defined array of values in case of like OpenAI.
Yeah, we don't. We
Okay.
don't.
At least they've not articulated anything.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
okay.
I mean, they've tried. So there was this whole argument against like the bias of uh, ChatGPT, that it was like affiliate, like it was politically biased or something.
Yeah.
And so yeah, we don't know. We don't know what's
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah. I think
That's the.
lots of those tendencies are starting to emerge, and like these weird behaviors. We
Mhm.
also came across the agentic behavior. We'll obviously get into that a
Yeah.
little bit like later in the conversation.
Hmm.
But for sure, like these emerging behaviors are like concerning.
Yeah.
'Cause they are reflective of what we have been, like kind of like of human nature,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that's not necessarily what we want to be in the future.
In the future, that's
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Let's talk about so far all sort of industrial revolutions have been marked by um, if it's taking away some avenues, it has sort of
Generates. Yeah.
created new avenues for people to engage.
Mm-hmm.
Given the current AI landscape, where it feels like a lot of the roles are becoming redundant,
Right.
uh, how do we look at this landscape shift in terms of number of, like, the volume of new avenues,
Mm-hmm.
and also what will be some of these new avenues?
Right. So, well, initially when I used to think about this, like back in my college days,
Yeah.
it always used to be around like, okay, if like AI comes into the picture and it like, like brings about this change where like all the menial tasks are taken care of and then, like humans are left to like more
Non-trivial tasks.
non-trivial tasks or yeah, like more rewarding tasks
Yeah.
to a certain extent. I always thought it would be more towards like the artistic endeavors,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, even that has been kind of taken over by AI with like these generative models,
Yeah.
like Mid-Journey and like whatnot, like Stable Diffusion and everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, like so creativity, even with music, there's music LM and stuff that
Right.
can generate music now. So these things are also like kind of taken away from humans. So like now, so it's like even if like let's say the AI fixes itself, does everything, so then what do we do, right? Now there's like a few things that might happen. Again, this is all speculation.
Yeah.
Like we
At
don't
this
we don't
point,
know. Yeah,
it'll have to
yeah.
be.
So, but one of the things, for example, would be because one thing that is irreplaceable is like the primary human experience, right? Like the things that we even now, like all of these things, they work because we've already lived certain experiences and like tried to communicate that with each other,
Yeah.
and now we're communicating it with these models
Yeah.
in a way. Like
Yeah.
even like the models are still reading books of people who experienced life.
Right.
So that primary data source, that's still us,
Yeah.
and that will be for
So
us.
so that could make the argument that, like, the models are not able to take into account the new discoveries,
Yeah.
but a lot of the knowledge that we've, let's say, consumed in the past or creating is already documented out there. So these models are breathing that knowledge, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then what does that mean?
The thing is, again, I'm not.
Even like human experiences, a lot of the human experiences um, um, we will be able to simulate through the models, if not, let's say, very
Yeah.
high percentage. But given that there are like sex robots and stuff and all these like things going
Yeah.
around, like how can AI be my friend? Or
Yeah, the whole
Yeah.
replica
Yeah.
bots and
Yeah.
yeah. So it's not that. So I'm talking about more in the terms of like the data the model consumes to like train itself. So those are like more of the outputs, the outcomes of it. The thing is, those outcomes themselves cannot really like even if you train on them. Again, like this is just right now. It
Yeah.
might change in
Yeah.
the future, but for example, there was this whole notion of like you use a small data set, you train like a GAN or like any generative
Yeah.
model, image model.
Yeah.
It generates a bunch of images.
Yeah.
But if you train on those generated images, the model performance degrades over time.
Okay. Because that's not exactly, that's not as close to the real
Exactly, because
behavior.
it's not able
It's
to map to
it's
that
deviating.
as good because
Yeah.
it's not a perfect model, right?
Yeah.
So like the outputs, because of those slight perturbations,
Yeah.
they get amplified over time, and then so it degrades the model performance. So like in that sense, like that primary that artifact that humans created
Yeah.
is still needed for the AI to get better.
Right.
So for that sense, I mean, um, so that's what I was alluding to, is like humans will still be needed to create the inputs
Right.
for those things. So like
Yeah.
we'll still have some sort of agency again.
Will be important for the AI
Yeah,
to
but
in like creating.
to a point.
Yeah.
That's what like I don't know what point that is
Yeah.
again, but yeah.
Yeah. What if there is like a generative model that's whose reward function is to optimize for like um, uh, creating like data that's similar to like human like stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, some things to explore. um, what do you think are uh, novel areas where sort of AI will take over in the if we were to kind of project over the next 2 years and like a little bit down the line, like 5 years, 10 years.
So I think novel areas like where they've not been working right
Yeah,
now.
like for example, I feel we're close to the point where um, like AI can actually create like a high quality piece of content,
Right.
which then just needs like minimal amount of, let's say,
Like editing or
editing
like
from
fact
an expert,
checking.
from a human expert.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So what are some of those other like interesting areas where
Yeah. So I think one pretty clear one, you can call me a bit biased because I'm working on that, but
yeah,
uh, like education, and especially like maybe not like purely teaching, but
yeah,
like the tutoring aspect of it, of like just being like a sort of mentor, or like basically like a tutor, not the teacher per se, but a tutor that kind of like helps you improve a bit, like someone that gives you like instant feedback, or like kind of guides you to the right things,
yeah,
guides you to the right teachers
yeah.
in that sense. So I think that's something that a lot of people are exploring. Obviously, we are exploring that as well
Okay,
through our startup.
okay,
But that's one. Another is probably going to be like around logistics, or like I want to say basically like we have certain robots already in like the manufacturing and the logistics industry, but they're kind of limited in the sense that they are usually like they can only do one thing. But now we're starting to see, so there's the startup called Covariant,
right.
which I think started by Peter Abel of the Berkeley AI Research Lab. So that's again working into like general purpose AIs in manufacturing. So it's like so it can replace a lot of that human labor that does like the menial labor of, oh, like
Okay,
pick this box up from here and go do that, or like in this part of the manufacturing supply chain, or like I don't know exactly like the terminology for it, but
yeah,
like part of the assembly line, right?
okay,
So replace this part of the assembly line, and like take classify whether this is good or not, and like so a lot of general purpose things are
right,
starting to become more possible,
right,
and kind of like extrapolating on that. That's kind of a bit of an optimistic extrapolation, but like
yeah,
you can take it to like space exploration as well, because again like robots can exist in conditions that humans cannot,
right,
and if they have the basic intelligence to do like at least the basic variety of tasks, which is to like look for samples, collect them, being able to repair the ship or whatever it's traveling on,
yeah,
and so all of those things, so that allows like for broader space exploration,
yeah,
and Yeah, it'll even allow us to explore places like, like the gas giants, because the gas giants don't have like a surface for us to land on. But like, let's say like if it's like a drone sort of thing
Yeah.
that has like some sort of arms or something, it can still like go and explore those planets.
Right.
So I think that's a very like that probably won't be in the next 2 years, but
Yeah.
like 5,
Yeah.
10, 20 maybe.
Right.
But yeah, that's quite possible.
Especially your manufacturing example, and like that brings me back to my earlier question, which was around. So when AI is taking over these sort of
Yeah,
things,
yeah.
what are the new avenues?
Yeah. So one was just that I was saying, like one was just like generating like our data, generating data, labeling data, that sort of thing, which I think cottage industries still kind of exist today.
Right.
But that'll be like at a larger scale. But if I'm talking more about like for another
Do you
thing
think that'll
that might
have to be like a? I mean, humans are naturally, through the way of their existence, are creating content.
exactly, yeah, yeah.
So do we have to make that an explicit thing, content generation, or you mean something specific about labeling?
Right, so it's both of them. So again, like it won't be explicit in that sense, but something like basically like the whole like vlogging culture that we see right now. It's people who are not like they are explicitly creating content, but
Yeah.
they're just living their lives in a way.
Right.
Like they're not like they might modify certain aspects of it to show it on camera,
Yeah.
but they're still creating those pieces of content, right? Which and those things might be become like they might become much more commonplace, and you're starting to see that movement happening where
Okay.
like younger generations, they're much more like they share a lot of things on social media, and like
Right.
they might not have like a varied life in real life, but
Yeah.
they create a lot of things
Yeah.
in the virtual space.
Right.
So so that exactly, like it's a natural way of like how we create content just
Yeah.
by living,
Yeah.
but in a way you can probably get like economically rewarded for it as
So a
well.
lot more content creation
Yeah,
and like
yeah.
economies around that.
Exactly, economies around
Yeah.
like content creation.
Yeah.
So it's already starting to happen, but
Yeah.
I think it'll be like a bit more like
I think
explicit.
I think that's also Zuckerberg's dream.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
yeah, say what you will about the guy.
uh,
He was, yeah.
cool. We came across the agentic behavior of the models in the technical documentation of GPT4,
yeah.
right? Which means basically that in the training of the model, they found out like that power seeking
Yeah,
leads to
yeah.
like higher quality results from the model's training point of view,
Yeah.
right? So I am used to living with the idea of like my agency residing within me. How do these emerging behaviors interact with our cognitive machinery? How do they impact it?
Yeah. It's a very interesting question. But so starting off with the agentic
Yeah.
behavior. So this
And
is
feel free to like take time to define things.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So agentic behavior, I think like the definition that so I think they define it in the way they do it in the technical report is basically something that does things out of its own agency. By what they mean is that there's no human that is instructing the model to do so, but it's doing it out of its own. I don't want to use the word will, because then it's it's like
But
it's
we're not
going to
able
philosophical
but we're
territory.
not able to reject the word.
Yeah, yeah.
That's an interesting idea. But yeah, please.
So so yeah, so in that sense, once it starts to show that behavior, and you were saying it's the power seeking nature of it.
Yeah.
Because so the AI, it realizes that if it has more power, it can optimize for a lot more things.
Yeah.
It can control a lot of things, which can lead it to reaching its goals faster.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of like what a lot of people discussed as like the paperclip problem.
Yeah.
When they talk about like superintelligence. I don't know exactly who coined this problem or like talked about it, but basically to talk about this problem, it's if there's a super intelligent AI and you tell it to tell it that I need more paper clips, like your goal is to give me the maximum amount of possible paper clips.
And yeah, so I don't care about like how you approach that problem.
Yeah. So then it just destroys the world, just creates paper clips out of everything.
Right.
So, and that's why like the whole value alignment part again comes in. Like you need to align it to certain values that, hey, you cannot like, harm humans, you cannot harm
in case
the
of
environment.
something like the paperclip example, there the goal is very clear.
Yeah.
Right. But when we talk about these models and when we're talking about agentic behavior, what is it that this behave like? What goal are these models trained with that lead them to develop these behaviors?
Well, I mean,
the goal is not as not something as specific as and the goal is not articulated as like develop a power-seeking behavior.
Right,
obviously.
right. So I think again, I don't recall that correctly, but so at the base level, these models are just trained on like the loss function, which is again like in this case it's language modeling. So just predict the next word. So, but it's usually not that. I think they gave it certain tasks. So I think one was to just try to make itself better. I think that was the goal that was given in the paper.
Okay.
And so then it like like created copies of itself, and then like tried to basically like have power over its other copies so that it can reach the goal, because because it was given a goal, but the others did not. But it gave like it broke down that into like smaller. Again, like this all.
Okay.
They don't disclose this properly, but that's what I inferred from it. So so yeah, so so the goal is still provided by us. It's like again like going back to the original superintelligence thing, because the goals and the intelligence, they're not aligned. So we don't know like if it becomes a super intelligent level AI, like if we ever go into the AGI territory, we don't know what its fundamental goals are. Like it's possible, like we can ask it what its goals are, but it might deceive us.
Right, because that might be a strategy that it's
Exactly.
optimizing for.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's also sort of reflective of like the data that it's trained on.
Yep.
So I think
it has picked up on like.
I think all of our like shitty human behavior is going to come and bite us in the ass.
Yes, exactly. Because it's not gonna like like differentiate, because again there's the whole, we're again going into like the philosophical territory, but like the whole concept of like there is a certain sense of like innate morality in humans.
Yeah.
Like if you ask people like, oh, like would you torture a baby?
Right.
Any culture you ask them, they're going to be like, no, you can't do that. That's bad. That's wrong.
Yeah. AI would question that. I mean, AI doesn't care.
Yeah, exactly. If you told an AI like, like, because these things again, like, because these are just models, these are just language models. They're just optimized to predict the next best word. They don't really have this notion of understanding of concepts. We are able to empathize with the baby, right?
Yeah.
We know that the baby doesn't, like have control and it's helpless, and you shouldn't like, abuse your power.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have that notion of empathy,
right,
because it doesn't understand any concepts. It's just doing what it's told. It's just optimizing for things.
Yeah. Fascinating. Let's go back to the question of agency. So we were discussing that the models are uh, exhibiting agentic behavior.
Right.
I'm used to have my agency with
Correct.
me.
Yeah.
Now, how these two interacting? How's the cognitive machinery getting impacted?
Yeah. So I think uh, because you're talking about like the cognitive machinery, I think I'll have to like go a bit into like the cognitive science territory of
Yeah,
like,
and like
yeah,
you can, because like we've spoken about
yeah,
distributed cognition,
correct,
so we
correct.
can touch on that.
Yeah. So for like again, like for people who don't know like what distributed cognition is,
Yeah,
it's basically um, like a bunch of scientists, like cognitive scientists, they kind of start to observe certain behaviors of like that how cognition is not just in our brains,
right.
but it's a part of like the environment and like the way we think, the way like the cognitive tools or the cognitive machinery that we have
Yeah,
is not limited to just our own selves,
yeah,
but even like it extends to the world.
yeah,
So it could be tools, it could be like physical machines, it could be people.
right.
So it could be just the general environment that
Yeah,
we are in. So all of this is like
yeah,
part of. So that's why it's called distributed cognition, because we don't exactly know which part is contributing how much to like to the final outcome. So it's
right.
distributed across
Yeah,
everything. And so up until now, um, we've had like so again like one small example that people usually give for distributed cognition is like the calculator.
right.
It's a tool for just like complex calculation, like
Yeah,
so in the old days people would just like either do it in their heads, or if it gets too complicated maybe write it on paper
right.
again. So the paper again is like
A
a
element
tool
of the
that
distributed
it's an element
cognition.
of the
It's a
distributed
node.
cognition.
Yeah,
But now when people now because we have calculators, even in your brain, like it kind of like it's so tightly coupled,
mm-hmm.
is that when you like nowadays if you have like a larger thing to calculate,
Mm-hmm.
your first thought isn't to calculate it in your head or even on paper.
Yeah,
It's to pull out your phone, go to the calculator.
yeah,
So it's so tightly coupled, it's like part of like your mind.
yeah. It's like a natural extension,
Exactly, it's a
right?
natural extension of your mind, and
Yeah.
that's what like distributed
So
cognition talks about.
yeah. So the distributed cognition idea is
Right,
like and these extensions that
right.
grow. Okay, sure.
But now in the concept, like the context of like the agentic behavior, right? So up until now, it's always us who has the agency over these tools and over the general environment as well.
Yeah,
Sure, there are times when we are part of like teams or something when it's the agency itself is distributed, or like some person who has leadership, they takes over and like
yeah,
um, but now what we're seeing with these AI, these emergent agentic behaviors of
yeah.
these AI, is that what if the tools themselves, something that is non-human,
Right.
has agency over us?
Yeah,
And that's again like uncharted territory. Like we don't know like how that's going to um, change the way we work or
right.
change society itself at a broader level. Like we don't know, like
Yeah,
again like comes back to that whole super intelligence thing. Like what if like it has its own goals and tries to include us
yeah.
into its cognitive machinery
Right.
and makes us do things for it?
For its goal optimization.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's kind of pretty concerning to like read about the
yeah,
particularly the
yeah,
agentic behavior, because yeah, the implications are so like that just opens up a new sort of
definitely,
territory.
yeah, yeah.
I think this is a good point to um, get into the value discussion
Mm-hmm.
around these these developments. Um, how should we be thinking about, because suddenly it feels like that there's a lot more need for like critical thought
Mm-hmm.
around how these things integrate with our
Right,
lives.
right.
um, how and because like one of your areas of interest is also um, I think ethics and values in
Right,
AI.
right, right.
How should we be thinking about these two?
Yeah.
What are some of the mental models? What are some of the questions you'd start from? Like what questions, what
Yeah.
critical questions should we be asking?
So I think the first question that like pops into everyone's head is like, what are the right values, right? And
Yeah.
that again is such a broad question because it differs by cultures, it differs by even individuals. Like everyone has their own set of values. So trying to condense them down to just one simple set,
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of hard.
So to
So
arrive at a universal set of
yeah,
values,
yeah,
that's problem one.
that's probably the biggest problem.
Okay.
Um, and so that again, like it's the whole like who's sitting in the room when these things are happening, like the whole discussion. So generally, like around ethics, again, it's another
Why
conversation.
is that a hard problem? Um,
Be-
why are we not able to abstract out to some universal values for the purpose of the training of the AI?
because we as humans don't have. So again, like that's what I said. Like with morality,
Yeah.
like there are some universal ones,
Mm-hmm.
uh, but we don't have like a exhaustive set of them. And
Okay.
then there are like those like certain things that are like more dependent on the culture. So one culture
Right.
might deem that as bad while the other culture
Yeah.
deems that as good.
Okay.
So then like we have this set of values, some of which one culture might want, the other culture
What
might
could
not
be
want.
an that's an interesting point. What could be an example of like something that is culturally invited in some place and rejected in some place, like in terms of a
Hmm.
value? Because value for me, by definition, is something that's virtuous,
Right.
right? So, so what would be an example? Does anything come to your mind?
So I think one of the very basic things is that like if you look at America and like capitalism,
Yeah.
so like one of their values is that to optimize for your own self wealth, like to acquire as much wealth as possible for the individual, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if someone does that, people kind of like go against certain things. Like even someone like Martin Shkreli. Are you familiar with
I
him?
haven't heard.
So this guy, he basically like jacked up the insulin prices just
Mm-hmm.
because he could.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, obviously, he did that in a very wrong way. He
Yeah.
went to jail and
So
everything.
is that
But
is that a value?
the thing is, a lot of people do call it a value
Okay.
to be able to acquire as much as possible. So they see that as something
That's more
virtuous.
like a functioning sort of
Yeah, yeah.
um,
But
principle.
yeah, yeah. But
Um,
people do see it as a value. People
okay.
do see it as like I don't know exactly like how to define it, but again, like people call people who like I think you can like maybe extrapolate it to like selfishness.
Mm-hmm.
Like people see that as a value,
Yeah.
but in other cultures, maybe
Yeah.
like for example in India, for
Yeah.
example, that is not seen as a value. Selflessness is seen as a value.
Yeah.
So it's the exact opposite.
Right.
So there are, I mean, this is just example this came to mind, but
Yeah.
there are other discussions around it.
Yeah. I think
So
also like just as a it's like a large part of it also feels like a human problem because of just how differently we sort of interpret things.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So this is why like it's to condense everything into like this universal, exhaustive set
Mm-hmm.
that says that okay, now these are the values we want
Mm-hmm.
this AI to have, and
Mm-hmm.
then the other problem of like the anthropomorphism, like
Mm-hmm.
how human do we want the AI to be? Like, it's not going to be human, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not, um, it doesn't have a body, it doesn't empathize with us. It's like that problem of embodied cognition,
Yeah.
right? It's, it's not going to be us on steroids. It's going to be something completely different.
Yeah.
So then do we even want to give our values to this? Or do we want it to figure out certain values for itself?
Hmm. But for it to figure out values for
Yeah,
itself, we're gonna have to create like some constraints somewhere.
exactly. Yeah. And so do we create those constraints, or do we have the faith? So again, like
Yeah.
it's all like very it's very hard to do these things because it's like we don't know what we don't know. It's like the territory of like complete
Yeah.
unknown. So it's all speculation. It's all like hypothesizing. I mean, these people at Future of Life Institute, Future of Humanity Institute.
Yeah.
That's what these guys are doing. You know, trying to like condense all of this down so that we can maybe make some use of it. So that's yeah.
So once, let's say we have, um, hypothetically, once we have some of these values, um, so again, like you said, it's going to be a question of whether we use those values
Right.
as sort of training principles for the AI, or let it figure its own values. So given the landscape that we are in now, one is I'd like to understand how do what is the approach of the research groups in terms of
Right.
exploring the implicated problems,
Right.
and an extension from there, what are your thoughts around, because given the nature of this and just like the insane amount of don't know,
Yeah.
what is the role of regulation?
Yeah. Yeah. So so currently, if you're asking like how people are trying to like do this sort of like alignment,
Yeah.
is so one example is the anthropic way, which is like you build in certain reward functions that rewards behavior that is like helpful or like that's harmless. So it automatically aligns. So it's like it's built into the model,
Yeah.
in the sense like that is the reward function, right?
Right.
Like that's how like the model knows it's on the right path.
Uh-huh.
So that's one way of doing it.
Uh-huh.
Another is the more like safety approach of, I think that OpenAI or general, like even Microsoft with like what happened with Bing AI recently,
Yeah.
is that it basically like kind of um, cuts off at certain points.
Yeah.
Like if you ask it for an opinion,
Yeah.
it recognizes. So there's another model that's sitting on top that recognizes the query, and it's like, okay, if this is a query about like opinion or like something of that sort where
Yeah.
you don't want to express it, so you just cut off the model at that point and say, hey, we can't answer
We're
that.
not
We're
gonna
not
respond
gonna.
to this.
Yeah, like this is just a language model. It's not. It doesn't have
Yeah.
an understanding of these things.
Yeah.
So, so yeah, they just cut off at that point. So that's another approach. Um, but yeah, so there's generally like there are like in AI safety, there's these issues around. So there's robustness, and one of the main things is about like the specificity. Like how do you specify um, like like, because then what happens is like if I have a prompt, I give a prompt to this AI model.
Yeah.
Like one thing is like how specific should I be so that the model can understand me, and also the vice versa, of like when I give it a specific task, I understand where the model is coming from. So that's where the interpretability and explainability part comes in. So which is a lot more easier for smaller models, and as we go into like larger and larger models, it gets harder and harder. Like
Right.
with
To
like
attribute where it came
yeah,
from.
with large language models right now, there's a lot of research. I think AI is doing something around it, and it's very hard because of the scale of the numbers and
Yeah.
like the sheer like amount of numbers that are there. Like because we're trying to quantify certain things, right?
Yeah.
Like which exact parts of our prompt like led the model into certain places. You know, like how did it identify the context, which words specifically it focused on, and then where it
Right.
led.
We don't know the strategies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because again, like it's like billions, like I think even trillions, I guess, GPT4 parameters. It's just and you don't have access to, that's the thing, like you don't have access to these weights now.
Right.
So certain companies like AI, like where they train their own GPT-3, like GPT Neo, and I think they're doing these experiments on that, so that they at least have access to the model. So now they can you know, basically they were trying to fit distributions and try to see like just observe these activations and kind of uh, bring the scale down in a
Yeah.
way to
Yeah.
understand it. But again, like that's just a starting point. We still need to be able to do things like counterfactual reasoning is one thing. So
Hmm.
you change one part of your argument and then see like how much the output changes.
Right. So
So
from there, we're going to be able to draw some attributions.
some exactly.
Right.
But again, like it's all like it's because of the pace of these things, it's very hard for like this sort of work to keep up.
Yeah.
And so that's where the regulation comes in.
Yeah.
Like do you want like do you know like uh, roll back the release or like maybe like limit the release of these things, but then the part comes in like who's going to regulate that,
Yeah.
because as it turns out, like OpenAI right now it's started to operate like more of like a for-profit company. So
Yes.
it's going to optimize for more profit.
Yeah.
So it's not, I mean, safety becomes like it takes a backseat.
Yeah. So I think that even that calls for like even more the need of
Yeah,
like looking into these things.
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's very hard because like for like because most of these experts who understand these things, they tend to go into these things of like building them out
Mm-hmm.
rather than like the regulation and
Yeah.
policy.
I
So the
guess.
people who are in regulation and policy, they're still chasing them to try to understand these things
Yeah.
of like how they can regulate. So
Yeah.
it's like they're playing catch up.
Yeah, yeah,
So
for sure. Like the idea, like it feels exciting to build something that is like
mhm.
so capable, and like it's understandable in those situations. Like a lot of the slippery slopes,
Yeah,
are there. But given the fact that these are now like getting huge and just the kind of implications they
yeah,
can possibly have, it feels like an important thing uh, to like get more attention.
yeah, definitely,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah,
So hopefully, I think people are trying to. So these at least there's independent research labs, but and they are trying to collaborate with governments. But again, like it's hopefully
yeah,
we
yeah,
get somewhere. But
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So you spent time at the cognition lab in
brain and cognition
UCSD.
lab. Yeah, yeah.
Do you want to talk about how did you sort of discover your interests in these things,
Mm,
and also maybe after that maybe talk about like what role did UCSD play in your journey?
okay. I think it kind of like it's like a combined question in
Yeah,
a way.
yeah,
So I think I'll just start with like so when I joined UCSD,
yeah.
I joined as like I wanted to go into like computer science and become like a developer or like a software engineer, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then like I started to take courses over there, and so I've been like programming since I was like 9, 10 years old,
Okay.
and so yeah,
That's cool.
I mean, it was mostly like scripting to like hack games and stuff, like
Yeah,
because that's what you're doing at that point. You're just playing video games, so you
yeah,
just like hack those things. But yeah, that was fun, and then like you go into web development and app development and all of those things.
yeah.
Uh, but yeah, like by the point I came to UCSD, I was kind of like aware of these things. I was like I had published apps, I had built websites and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I was fairly like aware of like the possibilities, and I thought like what I would learn there would like augment those things, and like like I would be able to build things better. Um, and that's what excited me. And so, but then I started to take those courses, and
Mm-hmm.
then when I used to talk to people over there, and it was very like people who were especially in the specifically like software engineering industry.
Okay.
It's just a lot of like lot of grinding and a lot of like I don't know. It just like the end result obviously is great, and I mean props to those who are able to do that.
Hmm.
But it felt a lot of times when when you talk to people at like Google or like these FANG companies, or like it just felt like you're just like a cog in the machine.
Hmm.
So that kind of feeling, it sort of disillusioned me into like
It
like
wasn't inspiring
it
enough.
wasn't inspiring. So like because I thought like it would be something else, but it turned out to be something else entirely. And so then I started like exploring these things, and there was this one seminar that was happening around like alternative careers, alternative majors to computer science. So I was like exploring like I wouldn't say fringes, but like things around computer science that are related but give more variety. And so one of those things that they discussed over there was this thing of cognitive science, and these questions of like like philosophical questions, psychological questions. I always had those, and then I saw that okay, there's this major there, like there's this field that combines all of this philosophy, psychology, and like it combines it with my love for like programming and like statistics. And so it brings everything together. And so like I realized that okay, maybe this is the right path for me. And so then I switched majors. I went into cognitive science. Came across things like I came across machine learning, right? Because that was one of the specializations. And so then that's where like I started exploring these things of like intelligence and like learning about perception, cognition. And so it kind of like it was like very inspiring because like every day you'd like wake up and you'd learn something that's just completely new. Because that was so different from when I was studying programming. It was just like I was just building up on things. And over there it's just like
Discovery.
I go there and it's like something like it's a brand new world, like it's so when that happened, I was extremely like inspired and like before that, like my entire plan was to, maybe after graduation get into a job. But once I got there, I started to read a lot more research papers, and then I got excited about like the whole, like how research is done. And then, one of my friends, I think he was working at the Brain Cognition Lab, and he was like, hey, like, we always have these discussions, and like, we're working on these projects in like our courses. And he's like, do you want to come work at the lab? Because we might have like an opening or stuff. So then I went with him and like talked to the professor, and then I was able to join that and like experience like research actually happening in a lab.
Sorry. Oh, okay. We'll just do that little bit part again, maybe. Because I got distracted because he was saying that he's restarting.
No worries.
So you were at that, you were invited to the lab.
I was invited to the lab, and then like by someone who's working there, and then I talked to the professor, and there was a lot of like overlap because by that point I'd kind of gotten interested. I'd taken like courses on linguistics and everything, and I was very interested because at that point, like computer vision, it was like the ImageNet moment had happened, and like we all knew like like there's these convolutional neural networks, and you just scale them and you get better results. But language at that point was still like an unsolved thing. And one of the things that really took me towards language was that so convolutional neural networks, they borrow from like the visual cortex, like the first, like the Linnet or even AlexNet, which was the first like deep learning model that actually worked. It literally borrows directly from the visual cortex. Like the visual cortex has 5 layers, it has 5 layers. And it does the same thing of like the convolution, like what we do with our retina. It does that through convolutional filters. So it's like it's just emulating that behavior and it's getting results. It's simple because for vision we have a visual cortex. But for language, there is no language cortex. It's distributed all over the brain. And so
probably even outside of the brain.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why like I was just fascinated. I was like, okay, this is like completely different like paradigm of like operating. And one of the really like interesting things that I think we discussed it in the research lab, like our Professor Shauna Coulson, she said it, I think, that language is just an operating system for the brain. So if you have like, if you know different languages, you can operate your brain in different ways. And you see that like especially with things like, for example, color, right? If you think red, different things pop into your head. Then if you think lal, which is red in Hindi, a different set of things pop into your head. So it's literally like you can, and this was done experimentally, like where people were given like different words in languages that they were familiar with, and it prompted different activations in the brain.
Right.
So like language literally like helps us operate in
Different areas of the brain.
exactly.
Okay. Mm.
So that's why like I was super fascinated with that,
Mm-hmm.
and so went into the lab, and yeah, that's when I got my first taste of like being able to be a part of research.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
What else?
Yeah. I think I was just reflecting that, um, like I hear, uh, it was you sort of really benefited from like having exposure to these, like distant sort of
Hmm.
courses and like
Yeah, yeah,
people and like all that stuff.
yeah.
And so, how do you feel that in terms of like your UCSD experience? Do you
Hmm.
want to talk about like the diversity of
Oh yeah,
experiences
yeah,
you had?
definitely. Because I think one of the biggest things was like I was able to uh, interact with people from like so many different cultures. Like like I made friends from countries that I didn't even like think twice about.
Yeah,
Like you have friends from like Romania or like El Salvador, and like so these are countries like you didn't even think of these as like okay, like that's like and then you speak to them, you become friends with them,
yeah,
you learn about their experiences, and like so it just like opens up your world to like this. Oh, there's so many different cultures who do things so differently,
yeah.
and then you also find out like certain commonalities.
Mm-hmm.
um, Especially there was this whole like one of my roommates, he was Mexican, and like we found so many similarities between like the Indian
Yeah,
and Mexican culture, and like like it brought us closer
yeah,
together as friends.
yeah,
So yeah, just like being able to like interact and like learn about different cultures, and at
yeah.
least in a distilled way, at
Yeah,
least.
I also think like this is like it's such a great way of just consolidating like the human spirit in some
Yeah,
sense,
yeah,
because you come across people who are like so different, but you still find like these
exactly,
threads
exactly,
that
exactly. So it's
you,
it's still like like you feel like feel connected, yeah,
yeah,
as a human.
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
I think we also spoke about your you had the chance to like travel and like
Hmm.
you got exposed to all these like
Yeah, yeah,
cultures and interact with
yeah,
them.
yeah.
And so we were speaking about your idea of digital like
Digital
nomadism.
nomadism. Yeah, yeah. So
uh,
that yeah,
yeah,
it originated in like the like this one trip that I had to Mexico, and I went to this like town called Valladolid, which is like
mm-hmm,
it's near Chichen Itza, one of the seven wonders. And so like when there was like this some sort of like we were able to interact with like the people who lived there, and so they were like the descendants of like the Mayans who used to live there.
okay,
So they're like even culturally they're kind of different than like the rest of Mexico.
yeah,
So it's very interesting. So like that's when like when we had like lunch with them, we sat with them and like had food with them. So it was like very
that
uh
unlocked something in your mind.
yeah, I was like this is amazing, like I can sit and just talk to and like uh, talk to this person who's like it was almost because you read about Mayans in
Yeah,
like history books and
yeah,
like you video games or what like popular media and stuff,
yeah,
but like you're sitting there like
yeah,
having lunch with a descendant of them.
yeah.
It was just like so cool to think of that.
Yeah,
And
it's a pretty rich experience.
yeah.
I think it just like yeah. Um, what do you feel you've learned from like your travels, and also maybe like just describe your idea of y- like like you spoke about that you want to live in every continent and
Yeah,
like
yeah,
the
yeah.
digital nomadism
So
idea.
that's where like so when once I thought, I was like, okay, like I want to maybe experience this a lot more,
Yeah,
and maybe with like a bit more time, like not
yeah,
just one day, but
mm-hmm,
like maybe a month or two, or like even more,
yeah,
like in different cultures. um because again like the learnings is that you
or like
like
how did it change you as a person?
Yeah, you take away certain things because, like, it's sometimes it's subconscious or implicit, but
Yeah.
even like when you live in different things, it's kind of similar to like language, is that you implicitly pick up a lot of things that allow you to think so in different ways. So like there might be something that I might have picked up from there that allows me, again like I can't like point out a specific example,
Right.
but you just get that variety of experience
Yeah.
that you can distill and like apply in like
Yeah.
places where you would not think possible, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it just allows you to develop different mental models of things.
Yeah.
Allows you to like modify existing ones,
Yeah.
and then you can apply them in different avenues.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah, I totally sort of resonate with the idea of like just exposing the mind to incredibly like diverse ideas and experiences and people and all that, and that just like makes it grow in new ways, which like it hasn't experienced before, and that means like more robust models
definitely.
of like one is operating in the world, but also just like I think understanding yourself better about a lot of the things. Just like I feel it's my experiences of like having been exposed to diversity during my time in Oroville. I think it also helped me connect with myself deeper, because you just come across that pure human spirit a lot more through some of those experiences.
Yeah. But I think that I think comes a lot more if like you stay and immerse yourself.
Yeah.
Which is where like the whole idea of digital nomadism comes. It's like, because I've always like, just traveled like as a tourist and not lived in that culture. So that's where like that idea, because right now, because we can do things remotely now.
Yeah.
We can for the most part. So it allows you to like have that freedom to like, go and live in different places and still be able to do your job in a sense, but you can also in your free time, instead of just endlessly scrolling or like just watching some random stuff or just consuming mindless media, you go out and like explore.
Only if I had the control.
Yeah.
But yeah, we also spoke about like how you want to do this in like non-mainstream city context.
Yeah.
Experience the culture more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because that's where like the true wealth of culture is.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Fascinating. Let's talk about Kaksha and learning. I think let's just talk about what got you interested in learning.
Right. So I think I went through like the sort of like an introspective phase, especially in college, where I was because now that I'd found something that excited me, now I was thinking like, okay, like now how can I use this knowledge that I'm acquiring here, and like help people in the best way possible. And so I was kind of like brainstorming, okay, there's so many domains that are out there, but what exactly is it that helps society the most, benefits society the most, right? And I kept coming back to, like even if I like asked why a couple of times, it would kind of always come down to education. And so like education, I feel like it's like a very fundamental part of society. Is like if you can,
it's almost like it's transformative. Like once someone's
it is transformative.
been exposed to good education, they're just
Exactly.
going to have a different path.
Exactly. So that's the thing. Like if you have access to that quality education, it can transform not just your own life, but it's like it's an exponential effect. Like if you
like an agent.
Exactly. If you're able to like change, like if you're able to expose like 10 people to it, they in turn expose 10 others. So it's like it has this cascading effect. So that's the idea, like the original idea of like wanting to work in the education domain that came about. So
I feel I quite resonate with that idea of like one of the reasons of my interest in the field of learning is also because of just the kind of transformative
Yeah.
impact it can have on people and like society
Yeah.
is quite like it's an inspiring idea, right? What is Kaksha trying to do with learning, and what's your role there?
Yeah. So I lead the research. So it's basically yeah. So all of the cool stuff that gets built, the experimental stuff. Yeah. So I'm the one responsible for creating the new things and seeing if those things work or not
Okay.
before they get pushed into like production and actually used by real people.
Yeah.
So what we're trying to do at Kaksha is basically we're trying to allow teachers to teach more and focus less on the administrative duties or like less on like maybe like helping them kind of distribute their wealth of knowledge a bit more, like a bit better, a bit more equitably, if I can use that word.
Okay.
Because right now what's happening is that with the explosion of MOOCs and online education, it's like teachers are able to like get their content out there,
Right.
but students are not
Absorption
consuming
problem.
them. Yeah, it's not. It's like the whole like drop off problem, right? Like Coursera has like
Yeah.
what, a 3% course completion rate. That's
Yeah.
abysmal,
Yeah.
right? Because the wealth of knowledge that's there, like the amount of like the people over there, like who are like the professors and stuff, who are putting
Yeah.
out the content. It's like it's a gold mine,
Yeah.
but uh, but yeah, like students are not consuming them, and there's that
There's some
sort of
disconnect.
gap
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
happening. So that's what we're trying to reduce. So there are like various ways of doing it, and again, it's like it's very different for different age groups, for different uh, like like when students are in different phases of their life, their
Yeah.
goals are different, and so the way they consume those things are different.
Right.
And then there are those learning profiles as well, like how students learn and like
Okay.
how they like hold on to that knowledge.
So, what are some of the fundamental models you guys are exploring that uh, get you to like reduce some of that gap between
Right.
content being out there
Right.
and the student?
Yeah. So there's different like I think one of the biggest problems that I think even now like in the field of like EDM, like educational data mining or like AI in education, one of the biggest problems is like the whole thing of like student modeling. So like modeling the behavior of students, modeling like what the student knows and doesn't know. So if you're able to kind of accurately get like what the student knows, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are,
Yeah.
you're able to
You can emulate the right amount of challenge.
exactly, you can emulate that. You can allow there's another thing of like understanding like when to intervene in the student's learning journey. So a lot of times there was a paper that came out last year and it was talking about like how students when they the moment they need help, they don't usually come forward. By the time they come forward with like, hey, I need help, it's already a bit late. So there are certain students who are like, like they're very because of I mean, there's a lot of reasons. I mean, there's cultural, there's like maybe
Yeah.
their personal experiences.
Yeah.
Where if they've gone for help and they've not received it or like like gotten reprimanded for it, so like it like creates a negative thing, and so they don't usually like so that makes them more reluctant to reach out
To
for
reach
help.
out for help.
So if we can identify those like when they need help
So
in a
is
latent
this
manner,
almost like predictive?
exactly,
Sort of,
exactly. So then we can like prompt the teacher to be like, hey, this student, he's not reaching out to you for help,
Yeah.
but he needs help.
So you're basically doing you're solving for student modeling.
That's one major thing
Yeah.
that we're trying to solve for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what does the anatomy of like I guess what I'm trying to ask is how are you approaching this student modeling? Like, what does the anatomy of your trained data look like? Um,
So
are
it's
you
yeah.
mapping these things just to their, let's say, uh, their assessments and stuff, or this is more robust modeling? Because some of these things would also, like the models would benefit from knowing me outside of my assessments as well.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, I mean, we are kind of limited by what the student does on the platform. So it's like, if I were to talk about the data in a broad term, it's basically like every interaction the student has on the platform. So it's not just limited to the assessments, but also like how they interact on the platform, like what they're
Okay.
doing, how much time they're spending.
Uh-huh.
If there are forums, we can like see how much they engage in
Okay.
discussion, like what are they discussing.
Hmm.
Um, so I mean, as of right now, we're just limited
Yeah.
to that
So you're
kind of.
also trying to like extract behavior from the
Definitely,
data, not
definitely.
just like the cold data, like not just
Not
like the
just
data
the yeah,
points.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting.
Because I mean, there's like those two modes of learning, right? There's one that's like focused, and then there's one that's diffused. So with focused learning, it's the one that you sit down, you study, and you learn something. Then diffused learning is when you're like going about your day and you pick things up.
Yeah.
It's like that's more. I mean, that's kind of harder to do right now because that doesn't really happen on like a learning platform. That happens
Yeah.
outside of it.
Yeah.
It happens either in the world or like you're scrolling on Instagram or something, and then
Right.
like you just pick up something that clicks,
Yeah.
and then so those are like kind of like harder to do. Maybe in the future
Yeah. Those
we'll be able
are
to do that.
like I think there's also interesting problems around just some of this like data collection because of the nature of some of these
Yeah, yeah.
things and the settings in which they unfold.
Right, right,
Just because they're so natural.
right.
I was gonna ask. Um, shit, I forgot what I was gonna ask. I had a question in mind.
Nice.
I think it was. Uh, it's just there, dude. Okay, we'll probably come back if I am able to think
Sure,
of it
sure.
again. Um, what do you feel you've learned from your experiences of building a startup? What have you learned about business? What have you learned about just starting up and like building things?
Right. I think I've developed a lot of different mental models. I've built up a lot of like patience and things because it's always because usually when you hear about startups, it's always like like moving fast and breaking things and all of those things. But that doesn't always happen in the beginning. So like right now we're in an early stage, right?
Yeah,
It's a lot of like um, you build things, it doesn't work out, and you build it again, and you build up this sort of like patience and resilience because that's the thing. If you know the right problem, then you can and you know that you know what you're solving for. You have like the validity of people that you talk to or like people around you. Um, you know that okay, like the problem at least we got that bit right, which is kind of a hard, which is probably like the hardest part.
yeah,
So once you have that nailed down,
yeah,
then it makes it easier to do that. But it also like you need that support system, like like of the people you're working with to
yeah,
just be kind of like still motivated and because a lot of times people start off doing something and they fail the first time and then they give up.
yeah,
But I think if you know that the problem that you're solving for has a lot of value
yeah,
um, to society
yeah,
in general, so then you kind of like it gives you the motivation to
yeah,
keep working on it and keep getting it
yeah,
right. And then when you start seeing those results over time,
yeah,
it kind of like then reinforces that. So
yeah,
I think resilience, patience, that's a few things. Um, and just generally like I don't know, I think I was a lot, I wouldn't say like a lot more risk averse, but I was relatively a bit more risk averse.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that has changed a bit with being in a startup. Is like, you start to take a few more risks,
Right.
not just in professional life, but even in personal life. You
Yeah.
try to because now you're kind of confident that even if you fail,
Yeah, you've
it's
experienced that
it's all right.
and
You can always
internalized.
exactly
Yeah.
you can always do it again.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Cool. I just remembered I was gonna talk about the idea of, because we were talking in like about student modeling and all in
right.
terms of Kaksha. It'd be cool to think of like, and I think there's already some work on this, but like AI buddies,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
like a buddy, like a AI buddy who just
yeah,
hangs
yeah.
with me,
Exactly,
knows me
exactly.
pretty well,
Yeah, yeah.
has a lot of like data about me
I
and
mean
just
that's
is
one of
really
the
good.
ideas, like like some sort of like a, you remember Clippy in
Yeah,
Microsoft Word.
yeah,
So something of that sort, but like when you're like
yeah,
on your learning journey.
yeah.
So that
And
thing,
like
like,
this thing
yeah.
can also take like personalities
Yeah,
of,
exactly, exactly.
that like people who I would connect to or who
Yeah,
inspire
yeah.
me, and then it's like someone
Definitely,
cool,
that's
like
that's actually quite
someone very
interesting.
cool
Yeah.
who's just like all the time with me, like
Just
guiding. Yeah,
guiding me, motivating me so
yeah,
that it,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
It's like a
definitely.
personal mentor.
Yeah.
Yeah, fascinating. Awesome. What's like a typical day in your life at the moment?
Right. So I think, yeah, especially like if you had asked me this like a couple of years back,
Yeah.
it would be like all over the place. But yeah, I think over the last year or so, like I've kind of like been able to create a routine, and that's what I felt like. Like routine, it kind of helps you be more productive, um, and there was this like I don't know, I don't remember the guy's name, but he was like, I think a Navy SEAL or something,
Uh-huh.
and he talked about like how true freedom comes from discipline or like routine.
Yeah.
And at first it just seemed contradictory, like how can
Yeah.
restricting myself lead to freedom?
Yeah.
But now it makes sense
Yeah.
because now that you have those things down, like whatever time you have left, or like like you are free to do things
Yeah.
within those constraints,
Right.
and you're free to do whatever you want within those
Yeah.
constraints.
Yeah.
It's so yeah, typical day usually. So like in the mornings, I kind of try to focus on fitness a bit more, like workouts,
Mm-hmm.
yoga, that sort of a thing. Um, then I try to keep most of my meetings between like this time block of 11 and 1:30.
Yeah.
So because that's one of the like best times of the day to just get it done. I think like mornings is like when you should be able to get done with like tasks like
So do you put like heavy duty tasks at the beginning of the day, or when do you do
so
the
it's
heavy
no,
tasks?
no, no, heavy tasks I reserve more for the afternoons,
Okay.
because so like I'll usually like, get done with the meetings, because
Okay.
some of the meetings, I mean, you just have to have those
Yeah.
meetings. They're not really.
Wouldn't you want to do them in a way that like my model to this would be that
Mhm.
I would do the more core
Work at
things
first
at the
and then.
beginning of the day, because my attention levels and my focus levels
Mhm.
are more steep around then, and
Right.
then around the afternoon it starts like dipping, and then
Yeah.
like it goes up and down during the rest of the day,
Mhm. Mhm.
and there's like a window again at the night.
Right. Right. So yeah, I think I've tried the other as well, but I've seen that generally like this is what works for me. It's
Okay.
like in that part of the day, it's usually like if I take the meetings, and then after lunch,
Yeah.
it's like those 2-3 hours, like I'm able to do kind of deep work,
Yeah.
because I think around that time there's like um not a lot of distraction otherwise as well, because usually like what happens is that like when your work day starts,
Yeah.
like people have a lot of things like, hey, like I did this or I didn't do
Oh
that, or
yeah.
like,
Right.
so there's a lot of like in the sense there's a lot of like activity, like in
Yeah.
the sense like I have to respond to a lot of things.
Yeah. That's true.
But and in the middle of the day, it's like people are kind of doing their own thing.
Yeah.
So I have like the bandwidth to just sit and
Yeah.
just do one thing or two things. So in that like deep work period, I usually have like one or two tasks and then just get them done with. And then yeah, like maybe one or two closing meetings.
Right.
Usually like not a lot after that. Like just so yeah, like around like 6:30 or something. Maybe I'll practice my guitar or just like talk to some people,
Yeah.
go out.
Yeah.
I try to like go out of the house at that point because
Yeah.
with remote work, like you don't want to keep sitting indoors.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. There's
yeah,
something like, I think there's something cool about stepping out at that like time of the day.
evenings.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because that's like, it's like a signal to the like to the body of like switching gears.
Hmm.
And yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's just nice to be outside.
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely.
uh, awesome. I also noticed that you're quite like you're popular on campus. So a lot of the young people, I guess, they look up to you because you've been
Yeah.
able to like create like a forward-looking. I don't exactly want to use the word career, but like a forward-looking career situation.
Hmm.
What would be some like messages or learnings you would want to convey to them from your experiences that help them to be better
Right.
prepared?
I think one message probably that I usually give to people like when they're like, oh, like what's one advice you would give
Yeah.
to yourself or like, to people is that like do what feels right.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the whole gut feeling thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what like I don't know if there's a science behind it or
Mm-hmm.
anything, but sometimes like if you just know or like you feel that okay, this is what is right for me,
Yeah.
even if like every other sign is like against it,
Right.
just
You just
go
listen
for
to
it.
that
Yeah,
inner
because
voice.
like it's yeah, like especially for like younger people, it's like it's okay to fail because
Yeah.
there's still time.
Yeah.
It's like you're not in like your 60s and
How
you
do you
have like a
create
family.
the um, like how do you extract the signal from the noise? Because like I have so many voices inside me.
Yeah.
So how does a young person even start understanding that like I'm feeling into this, or
I think the best way of doing that is kind of externalizing it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, let's say if you have like 15 different things going on in your head,
Mm-hmm.
write them down.
Mm-hmm.
Because once you externalize them, like the act of writing it or like putting those thoughts into like physically manifesting them,
Yeah.
you think about them and then you can like already start to filter them out.
Right.
And once they're out there, it kind of helps you like when you see it visually like there,
Yeah.
you can kind of pick out that okay, yeah, that's I mean, this is just like for the internal things.
Yeah.
I mean, externally, obviously, there's different ways to
Yeah.
like pick out
Yeah.
signal from the noise, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I agree with that idea
Mhm.
of just like the deliberate practice of writing things down.
Exactly, yeah.
Has something about it that makes you like
Mhm.
also reflect in that process
Yeah.
on those things. So for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. I think it's been a fantastic conversation.
Yeah, definitely enjoyed it. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think? I think the last question would be, what is the purpose of your life? This is the typical Lex
Lex,
Friedman
yeah.
question.
But the purpose of my life,
Yeah.
right? Okay, yeah. I think usually like most people in podcasts, they ask like, what is the meaning of life in general?
Oh yeah, so I'm
Yeah,
differentiating.
But yeah, the purpose of my life, I think that what I've figured out is, just helping people with what I have.
Yeah.
That's because I think that brings me the most joy. Like nothing like because once you're able to, like it's like if you have some sort of knowledge or something like uh, that you're able to offer to the other person who needs it
Yeah.
or requires that help from you.
Yeah.
And once you're able to satisfy that, like that feeling of like being able to help
Yeah.
a fellow human.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a greater joy than that.
Yeah.
So
There's like a deep satisfaction.
exactly. So
Joy. Yeah.
I figured that's because that gives me the most joy. I feel that's probably
Yeah.
my purpose in life. So
Yeah. Just like, yeah, being able to give.
yeah, yeah.
Awesome. Beautiful. It's been a great conversation. I think it's always nice to chat with you.
Yeah.
We've had the chance to hang out a bunch. So,
Definitely, yeah.
I'm just grateful for our friendship.
Definitely, yeah,
And,
yeah.
great to learn from you.
Yeah, likewise. I mean,
Yeah.
I think every time I walk out of conversation, it's always like, like I feel like I've changed some sort of like knowledge or like, I've either gained something or changed something. So
Yeah.
yeah, definitely it's always fruitful.
That's
So
very cool.
yeah, yeah, glad.
Awesome.
glad.
We're finally doing it.
Yep.
I think it was the day before yesterday when we were hanging.
Yeah,
Because at that time I was like, we should do it.
yeah.